now moving into our third speaker, who is Chantel Erfort. And she is former editor and owner of Chantel's Yoga Dojo. And she has over 25 years of experience in the media industry, having been a writer and editor-in-chief of a national group of community newspapers. And her full bio will be shared in the chat here on Zoom. Thank you so much, Chantal, for being with us. And we're looking forward to be hearing about maintaining and sustaining a healthy body in order to maintain and keep up with a healthy business, and hear about your personal journey as well in how you were able to champion that. I think all of our attendees have come back from the tea, so we may begin with your presentation and remarks, please. Thank you, and over to you.
Wonderful. Okay, so hi everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Paula and to Kath McGroby for their wonderful presentations. I'm sure that this is echoed by other people on this seminar as well. I kept finding myself nodding and understanding and relating what they were speaking to, particularly when Paula spoke about mentoring and about creating spaces like this where women can come together to assist each other, to share, and also the importance of being brave and acting, and what Kath spoke about, naming your fear and naming what makes you feel like an imposter. So I found those remarks and those insights very relatable and very powerful. So thanks to the previous speakers for that. So just to introduce myself, I'm Chantel Erfort Manuel. I'm a journalist and writer who up until recently worked as a newspaper editor. So I'm feeling a little bit like a fish out of water these days after 24 years in the same newsroom with the same people. And like many of you who are logged on today, I'm also building my own business, and I'm in the beginning stages of that. And in addition to my media work, I also teach yoga, hence the connection to a healthy body and being healthy in my talk. And I recently launched my own studio where some of the work that I do centers on pairing yoga with storytelling and writing, and using these as tools for working through stress and trauma and living more fully and more healthily. So I'm passionate about health and well-being. And through my work in the media, I always sought to use that position in the media to create platforms for us to talk about health, what it means to be healthy, and also for promoting more balanced lives. But before I really get stuck into my talk this morning, I'd like to do a little exercise with you, if you'll indulge me. Not physical exercise, but a centering exercise where we really calm the mind. I mean, we've just had these two incredible speakers and we've come back from a tea break. So if you could find a comfortable seated position, you may close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or simply soften your gaze to your desk or the floor and start to deepen your breath. And you can place your hand on your heart center. Either hand is fine. And just start to connect with your breath. Start to connect with what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And then we're going to move into a square breath pattern where we breathe into the count of 3. Pause for the count of 3. And exhale to the count of 3. And then pause to the count of 3. And then inhale to the count of 4. Pause to the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 4. And pause to the count of 4. We'll do one more round. In to the count of 4. Pausing to the count of 4. Exhaling to the count of 4. And pausing to the count of 4. And then allow the breath to settle and slip into a natural rhythm. And in this state of calmness and connection with the breath, I'd like you to think about what it means to you to be healthy and to have a healthy business. And if you've still got your pen and paper that you had with you for Kat's presentation, I invite you to write those three things down because we're going to revisit them a little bit later. So don't think too hard about it. Simply three things that come to mind when you ask yourself, what does health mean to you? And what does it mean to you to have a healthy business? So I know that the topic I've been asked is specifically healthy body, healthy business. But I'm going to do what most editors do. I'm going to edit that topic. Sorry, Bongiwe. I'd like to talk about healthy being, healthy business. Because I believe that health is more than just about having a body that is functioning and feeling well. I believe that health encompasses not only your physical well-being, but also your emotional well-being, your mental and your spiritual well-being, all of which exist within a dynamic ecosystem, each one affecting the other. So, for example, think about the last time you had flu, or you injured yourself physically, or a chronic health condition perhaps flared up. Your symptoms were likely not confined to the physical realm. Often when we feel ill or we're in pain, it also affects our moods. It affects our capacity to engage in intellectual exercises, and it also affects our ability to feel and express positive emotions. Likewise, if you're feeling sad or frustrated, these often manifest physically as well. This is the intensity of the mind-body connection. And so our physical and our mental and our emotional well-being inform and impact each other. And this is why I prefer to talk about healthy being, healthy living, healthy existing, rather than simply having a healthy body. Research shows us that chronic stress is a risk factor for physical conditions such as heart disease, obesity, and diabetes, while depression can manifest physically as fatigue, joint pain, gastrointestinal ailments. So think of the last time you had a tummy ache or discomfort in your tummy. And anxiety is often associated with nausea, diarrhea, perhaps even irritable bowel syndrome. And then what you might also have noticed is that the subtitle to my talk is a personal journey. And part of my personal story is about having to reclaim my health. Part of my story is about losing lots of weight, learning the value of balance, and importantly, kitting out a toolbox with the knowledge and the skills required to live a healthier, more balanced life, and to also take those principles into the workplace. Part of my story, perhaps like many of others of us, is about making poor lifestyle choices in my 20s, 30s, my younger days, facing some fearsome warnings, and thankfully managing to turn things around. At my heaviest, I was close to 108 kilos. I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, and I was warned that if I wanted to have children, my physical condition was putting me at risk of not having kids. That was at the end of 2016 that I made the commitment to myself to shedding those extra kilos and getting my physical body into a healthier state. What I didn't anticipate at the time was how this journey would also benefit me, both mentally and emotionally, and how it would also impact me at work. And it was the process of losing weight. It was in that process that I gained a whole new skill set. I gained the passion for promoting healthier living and a better understanding of the mental and emotional processes which lead many of us into unhealthy states of being. One of the earliest contributors that I could identify, and Kath McRoby spoke about journaling earlier. I do a lot of journaling. So I sat down and asked myself, how did I get here? And one of those early contributors that I identified was starting to earn money. as a young person, before you get your first job, you have money for nothing. You can't buy the things you like, you can't go to the places you want to go to. And here I was, suddenly a young reporter. I had very few financial responsibilities. I was lucky in that regard. I was getting a paycheck. What did I spend it on? Fast food. And those, Paula knows our Cape Town office. I worked right across the way from a fantastic fast food joint. And that's where we were every day. We were in there buying fast foods, sugary drinks. This is what we used our money on. And so, among those who are on the call who might work in newsrooms, watch your employees, especially the younger ones who are getting their first paychecks. This might be happening to them too, and it's fine to, tell them it's fine to enjoy your money, but also be mindful about what you're spending it on, and when it comes to food, what kind of food you're spending it on, and how often. So in the newsroom, we're always chasing deadlines. I don't think I've ever been in a newsroom that's calm and everyone's kind of just typing up their stories and they've got hours to go till deadline. So it wasn't uncommon for us to live on this fast food that we were running out to get, coming back to our desks and mindlessly eating. We were literally shoveling these things into our mouths, filing our stories. So we weren't thinking about what we're putting into our bodies. We weren't thinking about how we feel. We weren't thinking about, have I had enough? We just mindlessly shoveling that food into our bodies. So that was the first contributor that I thought about when I journaled about this. Another contributor was my postgraduate studies. And herein again comes the mental and emotional impact of things like self-doubt, of imposter syndrome. Having come from a technicon background, I was accepted into a master's program through the recognition of prior learning process. This meant that I was allowed into a postgraduate program without having a bachelor's degree or an honors degree. Awesome, right? Except it wasn't, not initially at least. I had had very little experience in deep academic research that's required when you take on a master's study. And while I could write and edit the hell out of a news story, I found myself getting 50, 60% for my assignments, and I just was not happy. My professor said to me, don't worry. She was confident that things would improve. And they did. But before they did, I had started eating my way through my feelings and drinking. And when I looked up from my thesis, what I saw actually turned out to be my next big challenge. So I use my thesis and my postgraduate studies as an example. But many of us on the call this morning might be facing other challenges that we don't know how to name. And one of the most powerful things we can do is whatever's making you uncomfortable, what is creating the fear inside of you, what's making you feel like an imposter, we need to find a way to learn to name that and address it, as was mentioned in the previous presentation. And that's where I'm going to pause with my personal story, because this talk is not going to be about what I ate or didn't eat in order to lose weight. And it's not going to be about how much or little I exercised. And it's certainly not going to be about how much I lost. It's going to be about how making life the cornerstone, making health the cornerstone of my life, not only made me feel better about myself, but also made me a better leader and made me realize the importance of bringing healthy habits into the office and creating workspaces where people can exist healthily. And I say that in the full knowledge that not all of us have total control over the environments that we work in. But a little bit later, I will be talking about some small things that we can do to start to create those environments. So what does it mean to create these workspaces and to bring healthy living into the workspace? Here I'd like to draw on the work of journalism professor Mark Hughes. His very specific research interest is in the concept of happiness in journalism and how the health of people in creative industries like the media are impacted by the very thing that they love the most, their work. And let's think about how many times we've complained about how much we get paid or complained about how much we don't get paid. And then we say, oh, but I love my job. I love what I do. It's a vocation. And so one of Professor Dew's takeaways in a recent Substack post that he wrote about his book, Well-Being in Creative Careers, is that while we as creatives and as media workers might love our work doesn't often love us back. And so when we as leaders in the media space are blessed and gifted with staff who love what they do and who view their work as a vocation, we owe it to them to create working environments and working conditions which reciprocate their love for their work. So let's think about that. If our staff love what they're doing, how can we show them love in return by creating spaces that foster and promote their well-being and their physical and mental health? So on this, Prof. Dews writes, this means creating work environments that are psychologically safe. They are equitable, they are diverse and supportive, not merely about passion and productivity. So there are people who might wonder why journalists and media workers in particular need such supportive workspaces. Maybe those people don't know about the traumas that journalists are reshaping into readable and viewable pieces every day, and crafting understandings and interpretations of the world around us. Perhaps those people who question this don't know that we as creatives and as media workers are working in a very volatile industry with ever shrinking newsrooms, and we're having to feed these websites and social media platforms with insatiable appetites for something new. Despite this, writes Professor Dews, journalists report the news regardless of their distress. Underneath the glossy surface of all these media, there's a dark world of rising health insurance and other labor costs. This is what his research has found. He's also found that there's lost productivity, absenteeism, and what he refers to as presenteeism, where people keep working through periods of mental ill health or physical ill health. And it often leads to high staff turnover and talent leaving the industry in droves. So when I decided to place more focus on my health and overall well-being, I made a conscious decision to make my journey a public one. And we can talk later about whether this was a good decision or a bad decision, and there were certainly lots of pros and cons. But what I did was I used the platforms that were at my disposal to write about healthy living. And I also tried to be an example in my own workplace. And here I'm going to share some of the ways that I try to be an example. And perhaps there are some things that others on this call can pick up on and perhaps implement in their own workspaces. So the first thing I did was I took control over what I was putting in my body. I stopped buying the fast foods and the sugary drinks, and I started packing my own breakfasts, lunches, and snacks for work. I had my own fridge in my office, but what I would do is I bore in mind that I wanted this to be public. I wanted to be leading by example. So my meals I left in the fridge in the common area of the office. And then this led to the next thing I did. I stopped cramming my food into my mouth at my desk. No one feels satisfied. Like even if you have the best meal in the world, if you're sitting working, you're not going to enjoy it. I often think of, the movie The Devil Wears Prada, where Meryl Streep's character calls on Andy to get her this fantastic steak, and she's about to sit and eat it at the desk. And I'm thinking, like, how is anyone going to enjoy such a beautiful steak when you're at your desk? But so, yeah, so that's what I did. I stopped sitting at my desk. I got up, I walked to the back of the office, to the newsroom, and there I sat and I ate my meal consciously. And over time, what I noticed happening was that others started joining me, whether they were bringing their own food or whether they were buying food. They came to sit at the back of the office, and this ended up becoming a very valuable space for downtime because sometimes people might not take time away from their desks to do anything, let alone eat. So it created that space for getting away from the desk. And it also created a space for talking about work in a bit more of a relaxed setting. And then I also made a point of trying to get out of the office for a few minutes every day, out into the sunlight. I mean, there were times that we used to come to the office at 6:30 in the morning and maybe even leave at 6:30 in the evening. I'm sure there are many people on this call, particularly entrepreneurs, people who own their own businesses, who are sitting at their desks all day long, really seeing the sun, particularly in winter when the sun is rising later and setting earlier. So at some point in my career, our business had two offices. So we had our corporate office and we had the newsroom. The corporate office was a kilometer away. And what I would try to do was I would walk. If we had meetings at the corporate office, I would walk down there and I would try to round up a posse. And what I soon noticed is that there are people who want to do these things, but some people need the example. Some people need someone to walk with. Some people need someone to go to the gym with. They just need that little bit of a push. And here again, this created an opportunity for people from different parts of the business to take a walk out in fresh air, to do something for their health, to talk about things work related, and to catch up with things that we might ordinarily just send each other an email about. Another small change that I try to implement, and those who still do printed page proofs, you might relate to this. Those in digital media might not. But what we used to do was when our subs were laying out the pages, they would bring it to the seniors in the newsroom, the news editor, the assistant editors. They would bring it to us for proofreading. And often I would end up with a pile of pages on my desk that I had to proofread. And often the temptation was to simply just check all of them and then take one walk through the newsroom and deliver all of them. And at some point, when I was trying to increase my activity during the day, I said, okay, I'm going to check a page, take it to the sub, come back to my desk, check it. And this is a very small thing. It might sound silly, but it's one way that you can decrease the amount of time that you're sitting in your chair. Because apart from the fact that when you're sitting, you are not moving, which is kind of the obvious thing. When we're sitting, we're also putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the spine, on the lower back, because let's face it, most of us are not sitting up straight. We don't have our ergonomically set up computers and desks. It would be wonderful if we did, but we don't. And so creating those opportunities for movement is so vital. Which brings me on to the next thing I did. I spent some time every day standing and working. And here, we can come up with all kinds of excuses. Oh, I can't afford 10,000 Rand for those fancy desks that where you push a button and it rises or it lowers. You can actually take a box and put it under your computer, stand at your desk and work. And what this does is when you are standing, you are less likely to stand still for a long period of time. You're going to walk around. It's just the way the body is. And of course, you will have to experiment with which tasks work standing and which don't. For example, if I'm taking a call, if I'm writing an email, those are fine to do standing. Even when I was, checking stories, I was able to stand. But the minute I did tasks which required fine motor skills, like perhaps doing deep etching on an image or laying out a page, I had to sit down. It's just the way the body is wired. And the breathing exercise that I showed you all earlier is a very, very powerful way to check in with your body when you're unsure about what your body's telling you. That is a very powerful method that you can use to calm your mind and really check in with your body. Ask it, what is it feeling? And I know I'm maybe sounding a little bit airy fairy here, but ultimately, this is our body, and many of us don't get to know it that well. And then modern technology enables all of us to work from the comfort of our desks. But humans are social creatures who thrive on interaction, and so does good reporting. So once in a while, even if it means that they're going to have less time to do that 8 stories that you want them to do, send reporters out into the field. Encourage them to have face-to-face meetings in between all the phone calls and the virtual meetups. It's so essential to get them away from their desks, out into the world, moving and interacting with other human beings. And then also essential for us as media leaders, keep an eye on your staff. Their body language will tell you a lot about how they're doing physically and mentally. And when you yourself are in good health and you have a good understanding of how good health manifests in your body and in your mind, you'll be more tuned to picking up when something's amiss. So even when we went through the COVID lockdown and we were no longer in the same space, if you know your staff, so for example, we were running the newsroom via WhatsApp, and we started picking up that a normally talkative staffer was eerily quiet on the staff group chat. And so when you are attuned to those kind of things, to how mental and physical health manifest themselves, you start to pick up those cues, and all of that contributes to how you can be a better leader in your business and how you can promote a healthier business. And then some other tips that people have shared with me. I've had friends who organize walking or running meetings. So I know that's not possible for all of us, but if you take the principle of that, why not take your meetings outdoors, or arrange your meeting at a coffee shop that's a little bit further away from the office than the place you'd initially thought of. And then I have a friend who has an office upstairs from her kitchen, and she only takes 1 glass of water upstairs with her. So when she wants that next glass of water, she has to go down the stairs and back up to get to her desk again. Our corporate office, where I worked previously, had this wonderful communal space and a kitchen and a space for people to sit, and there were snacks that they could pick on if they liked. But all of the snacks were sweets, biscuits, totally sugar laden, which is what we automatically go for when we're feeling that 3 o'clock dip in energy every day. But what happens is it's not sustained energy. What's happening is you're going to have that bar one, or you're going to have that sweet or that sweet biscuit, and an hour later you're going to come crashing down and you're just going to need it again. So one of the things we can do is let's stock up. We don't have to be boring and exclude all of those things from our communal spaces, but let's also consider including more healthy snacks, getting educated about what fuels energy. We give fat this bad rap, but healthy fats like nuts, avos, eggs, etc., those kind of things helps give us a sustained energy boost. Consider creating quiet spaces in your workplace where people can retreat for a timeout or maybe even to meditate. I know that newsrooms are often wild, loud, crazy places where people are talking and laughing and swearing and going crazy and making phone calls. But some people do need those quiet spaces every now and then, especially if they're working on a tough story, or it's something difficult to comprehend, or something that's really affected them. Importantly, let's create spaces and opportunities for talking and sharing. We often get stuck on this hamster wheel of simplifying, working to file the next story, upload the next podcast, or get to the next meeting without paying real consideration to those that we're sharing our workspaces with. So consider the unique situation that we as media workers find ourselves in, as well as the unique dilemmas that our colleagues might find themselves in and maybe need to discuss with someone who understands. And then if we think about the benefits of a healthy staff, we need our staff to be engaged in what we do. We need them to be healthy and free of stress, or as free of stress as possible, so that they'll be able to engage in their work and with the people that they're interviewing for their stories. And then healthy staff also means fewer sick days. So if staff are not taking time off sick, it means that other staff are not having to pick up the slack. So while I'm sitting here giving you all of this advice, I'd also like to caution you about being selective about which advice you take to heart. As entrepreneurs, as business owners, as people who are getting started in that entrepreneurial space, everyone is going to want to give us advice. And I found this piece of advice that I was given recently. I'm sure it came from a good place, but I actually laughed about it afterwards, because this person said to me, when you work for yourself, you have to be working all of the time. That's just how it is. And I thought, goodness, that is very concerning. And I think what we need to do is we need to look at advice like this and step back and ask ourselves, yes, of course, we want to be committed and dedicated to our new ventures, but it's not feasible or healthy for us to be working all the time or constantly intellectually engaged in our entrepreneurial pursuit. So, with that, I'd like to invite you to go back to the 3 things that you listed previously about what health means to you and what having a healthy workplace means to you, and start thinking about how you can start addressing those issues. If you said, if you listed something that you want in a healthy space, how can you create that? How can you make that happen? If you listed something that you think makes a healthy body or a healthy mind, think about what small steps you can put in place to make that happen. Thank you.